Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can. I
Fantastic.
just worry about how do I look in this camera. I can't see, anyway. Oh, this son of a bitchin' phone. Okay, you see? This is what happens. I hope you're not recording.
Oh, but I am.
Of
Always.
course. Frustrated. I'm going to quit asking that question, though, because I'm going to have to just assume you are recording.
And that's when we're going to get the 1-star review, which is like, I loved the show until Shane stopped asking in the beginning of the show if we're recording or not. That was my favorite part, and I looked forward to it at every season.
Well, I guess I'll have to do that. I don't, you know, I'm used to. I like the scripted stuff. Always fucks me up. Where I really just like to go with it. First thought.
Mm-hmm.
First, I shouldn't admit that though, because maybe people thought it was scripted before. But I really did. I kept asking for what has it been? 37 shows. Are we recording?
By now, I'm hoping it's a drinking game for those listeners who like to make amusement out of other people's quirks.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
So today's episode is an interesting one. Today we're going to talk about bullies, being a bully, being bullied, and everything within it. And I actually had started out telling an anecdote earlier over my pets and how I used to assume that animals become bullies out of being the runt of the family. So out of overcompensation, they do it as a defense mechanism. But I only thought this because I have a cat who was the runt of his family, who ended up being an absolute terror with other cats and just always needing to be the tough guy with other cats, but completely cool with people. This anecdote was later on debunked this year when I got a puppy. And the puppy was said to be the biggest of the bunch. And when I brought him home, he decided he was the king of the house. And he did not give a shit that my other animals are over 10 years old, have lived with me a very long time. He just became sort of a bully that my other animals felt the need to put him in his place and teach him, hey, that's not okay. So now I'm not very sure if coming from certain backgrounds actually makes someone a bully, or if their own experiences are so nuanced that we either experience bullying and become a bully, or if it comes from boredom, or what it might be.
That's interesting. When I think I love this because the first thought is I used to have a pass to a wolf center up in Ely, Minnesota, and I would go to the wolf center once a week. And I learned that the alpha is not at the front of the pack. It's at the back of the pack. And they put the more aggressive dogs at the front, the bullies, let's say, at the front of the pack, while the alpha sits behind and watches everyone do their job. The alpha is more of a foreman than a worker, than a brute. The alpha is a mind, is more of a mindful wolf than some of the other ones. And so the other ones are the hunters. They all hunt, of course, but it's in that pack, that's how that works out. And so I've also wondered, where does the bully fit into our society, into our species? Like a sociopath, I thought sociopaths, maybe they fit into our species at sometimes. Maybe they were the hunters. Maybe they were the ones that were able to just go out and tear up animals without thought and bring back meat. And then other people in our species did different, we all serve different purposes in this pack. Or as predator turns to prey and prey turns to predator. Maybe the bully turns to the bullied and the bullied turns to the bully.
I honestly think that there's no hard and fast rules, and I think that separates us as humans from animals that typically seem to have a system in order. Like, say you say wolves. That actually makes me think of an experience of mine where I got to experience dog sleds in Alaska. And a lot of those dogs are sort of in between working dogs on a farm and wild dogs. They're definitely nothing like my puppy. In fact, the musher gave me some frozen fish to feed some of the dogs, and one of them almost took out my finger. It was very painful. It was also like I had to take off my glove in the snow to give him the fish. That was terrifying. But I remember that she had said the back dogs are kind of a different role than the front, and I don't remember her actually stating what the ranking was, but the front dogs were always jumping up and down when they were asked to stay put and we hadn't started moving yet. The dogs would actually jump up and down as high as they could, even though they were tethered to other dogs, and they would be the loudest ones in the front. And we actually crossed paths on the trail with another musher who I think was less experienced and didn't have as good control over her dogs. And I guess word on the street in that neighborhood was that people generally avoid that woman and tell her to take a different path because she's less experienced. But what I had gotten to experience was these front dogs barking at her front dogs. And they're just kind of running toward us like the weirdest train crossing math equation, going ba 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 ba. And then they actually got tangled with my musher's front dogs. And the back dogs kind of stood back. They didn't really get involved with it. So it makes me wonder if that hierarchy is somewhat used to an advantage with humans who use dogs for work.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with dog sledding and stuff like that. I lived in an area, that Ely, Minnesota, where they had plenty of that.
Yes. A lot of Minnesotans come to Iditarod.
Yeah. So the thing you said up front, though, of that is like we don't have any fastened rules within our species. But I think somewhere along the line we might have. I think, I'm talking maybe it's evolved out. Like as our society hits a transparent and a controlled situation, some of these people are sticking out like sore thumbs, like the sociopath. And they're so stereotypical, the sociopath or the bully. Now, see, this is where I get confused with the bully. I wonder why the bully is always... See, I see bullying as a trickle-down thing, but I also see bullies as being seen as an alpha or a leader, much like you're talking about on those sleds, or much like maybe a wolf pack. And so, but they're always looked at as the alpha. And in today's society, like you're saying, this is our wild species that is gone. We have a different society. But, where was I going with this thought? Shit, I forgot, son of a bitch.
Perhaps the bully isn't necessarily a predestined alpha, but I think maybe they become the alpha by being a usurper to the top.
I wonder about that, because if we look at sports is where I see all these bullies ending up. That's probably why I don't like competitive sports. And I almost think like competition is a lesser form of bullying. So that's just me, where does the bully evolve from? And for me, in a personal situation, I've been bullied and I've bullied. And I looked up what bully, the definition of it was, and I relate more with the verb than the noun. Like my bully has been is more persistence, or you're not, I puff out my chest and I go right to the yelling and the fighting mode. In business, I'm a bully to get what I want. I don't take no for an answer until I understand why you're saying no. But in anywhere else, like in the streets of Chicago, it's like all of us have to learn to puff out our chest and fight back right away. It's If you show any weakness, you're taken as food here in Chicago. It's not, that's how it is. So I've learned to be a bully in two different ways, but neither of them makes me feel comfortable. As I see the alpha, it's the intellectual, the Bill Gates of the world, the people who are doing Google, stuff like that. Those are the alphas of our society. Those are the ones that are forging forward on our future. And I guess what I think is there's a fine line between control and control.
Manipulation, perhaps?
Oh, what the fuck? I have it written down.
Sorry.
Fine line between control and guidance.
Thank you.
So you can sometimes a guide I could take personally, like, hey, you're bullying me, the piano teacher, let's say, or whatever. Someone's like trying to guide me into something that I am confused by, or I'm totally opposed to. And so they become a bully in my mind. And I think maybe the bully has a part of a sadist streak, the true bully. When it trickles down, it's more of a reaction to what's happened to us. We learn how to fight from the bully dog. The bully dogs, the runts of the pack learn how to do that because they were bullied. But the real bully, the one in front of the mush cart, like, they have a part of sadist. They're part of sociopath or something. They're like, they'll rip you up and they don't give a fuck. When you meet real bullies on the street, they smile about fighting. They're not afraid. They want to fight.
I don't think those dogs in the front really care to be the alpha either. And I think of people I've met in crowds who were kind of like this. They didn't really care if they were on the top. They seemed to exploit whatever position they were in to behave at their own will, to, get what they wanted out of people, or perhaps that sadistic streak wasn't necessarily to get things done. For example, getting what you need as a publisher in your own work as a businessman, I wouldn't call that bullying. I would call that just persistence personally. But I think that you're onto something when you're talking about the piano teacher. I think of a lot of times that teachers, when I was a kid, seemed to not ever let up on me. Just every chance they had was to correct me over something, even if I wasn't wrong about something. And it's something that I noticed at an early age too, happening to other kids sometimes, where it just seemed like that teacher had a problem with something that happened in their life, perhaps, and that kid reminded them of it. So they just picked on that kid. Or maybe that was an easy way to blow off steam because you never got caught.
Yeah, well, that is like the fine line between being a bully and guidance, and that's what I keep thinking about in this whole thing. And when you talk about those people at the dogs at the front of the pack, how they don't care to be the alpha, I think actually they think they're the alpha because they're in the front. Because as I watch people, and the alpha knows they're the alpha because they're using their intellect. They're watching all of it and watching the chessboard. So they're able to go, yeah, go up front. You're the boss. Go ahead and fight because
they got nothing to lose. Yeah,
you go fight for us. Maybe the elk will give you what you're looking for, but I won't get that. You'll wear down the elk and I'll come around the side and I'll be eating the elk. Then there's the alpha always gets to eat first too. The people that the dogs in front kill, and then the alpha walks in and eats the organs. But he didn't he participates in the kill, don't get me wrong, but that's at least what I observed at the Wolf Center. And I don't know. There's something like the control. Why do people like bullying is not only, it's like an element of control.
Yes. Do you know what? Sorry about that.
I wonder where that comes from within our human. We're in a world where control becomes less and less important as our society gets more and more transparent. Yeah, I just wonder where the need to control comes from, because we certainly don't need to control as our society evolves to as our society is so controlled. We don't hunt for food. We don't. Our society is controlled, and now it's becoming transparent where you can't hide who and what you are. There's cameras everywhere. So brings the concept up to me is like that's evolving out of our species or out of our society, at least, the idea of control.
I think that it's sort of seeped more and more into our leisure more than other places.
What do the kids use now today? The word agency for control. Like they use a new word for control. They say, I have agency over that. I have agency over this. And I try to understand the concept of agency. And I think I don't know if the youngsters are combining control with some other concept, because it couldn't just be control. Because you can say, I have agency over my life. But if you go to work, your boss has agency over your rent. Your boss has agency over when you show up. And so what does agency mean? Is it just an individual thing? Like I have agency over the direction I take in life. I don't know.
I think it has to do with your personal life. But I think that especially right now with current political and other things in the news, that we've had a lot in the past year or so that we had no control over. And I think that the little things to say, I've got this, or I've got this under control. I'm a boss bitch. All these other, ways of talking about what control you have, regardless of if you're a bully or not. I think that those little things are in overcompensation of having a world we can't control.
Yeah, and I almost thought because the word agency, when people are trying to tell me what it means, like, what does that mean? I understand the word, the definition, but what does it mean when youngsters are using it? And so maybe that is our society going away from control, because we're transparent, everything's controlled, and really all I can do is have agency over my art. Yes. I can have agency over how I dress in the morning. And I think that's maybe what I hear in the youth, what I hear in that word. Is something that they're pulling away from the word control. Like, I don't want to be controlled. I choose to be at that job, or and I don't know.
It's interesting. I'm going to back up a little bit back to your analogy about the wolf eating, the alpha eating last. It reminds me.
Eating first. The alpha eats first.
Excuse me. The alpha eats first. However, he didn't kill the prey. What it makes me think of are shows I've done in the Bay Area where everyone was an amateur and I was the only professional musician there. And a lot of times the aggression within other acts to have things a certain way, and if you don't do it that way, they henpeck you, sort of reminded me of that. Because, to be honest, of course I want people to show up. Of course I want people to watch. But I didn't feel like it was that big of a deal, because it was always just... I felt like a guest in their community because I wasn't one of them. And yet I feel like I would always feel like, okay, I got to play. I'm going to go home now. But there was so much aggression over getting the glory of being the center of attention that these other people had, because they don't have that experience outside of, this once a month on a weekend sort of thing they had, whereas I've been on stage my whole life.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it is. You see this pattern throughout nature, if that's, and our society, which is nature, I guess, as well. But we see this pattern reoccurring. That's an interesting thing. And it still trips me out as how does the bully, the brute, the person without, is still taken as an alpha in our society when it's more of an intellectual thing. It's more of the person who knows how to play the instrument that is the alpha, let's say. I don't even know if we have a need for alphas anymore, but using that word by default, I can't, for lack of a better word.
I think in art, it's preposterous to have such things, but it's amazing how it's often the amateur who established these hierarchies, whereas the rest of us living as living artists, as full-time artists, this is our life. Because it's our life, we can't let things within our art bring us down. So why would you bring in this extra drama? Why would you bully other artists when you're hard on yourself?
Oh, I love that.
I think that a lot of amateurs come into our world, and they're more than welcome. Don't let me think that, don't think that I'm trying to keep people out. But I think that a lot of people who come into the art world later in life, or even as a part-time, sort of feel like they have something to prove, or they're very intimidated. So when they come into this world, they feel like they need to prove something. So then they kind of peck at people and make sure they don't pick on them for being an amateur or anything like that. And they end up being kind of bullish, controlling.
Interesting. Can you see anywhere in nature that and do you think the sociopath and bully are similar?
That's hard, because I think that anyone's capable of being a bully, but not everyone is a sociopath.
Okay, great. Okay, so where does the bully, when I think about the bully, like I immediately put him in a sports category. Like, where does the bully fit in our society where it's right? Like, you can't bully me at the grocery store and get away with it unless you are going to break the law and actually hit me. Like, there's laws against you physically getting in my space. So it's like I can say fuck you to the biggest guy in the grocery store. By law, he can't really do anything to me. He can, but it's illegal. And so I wonder, where is the legal, our society has deemed the okay prospect of a bully? Is it only in sports and war that a bully is actually like just like the wolves, the bully is actually needed? Like, where do they function in our society?
Perhaps in law practice.
There you go. Oh, that's fucking gold. The gold. Bullies function as lawyers and basketball players and football players and even tennis players. Wow, that's good. I like that, lawyers. Oh boy, yeah. I guess that's true.
Honestly, it's hard for me to picture people younger than me being bullies as much as my peers have been bullies.
Ooh, and then the boomers.
Yes, I think that everyone's either same age as me or older than me who is a bully. Even right now, the adults around Silicon Valley, like, there's a lot of very interesting bullying in this area without even working in tech. If you drive down the street, there's someone who won't let you merge into another lane because they had a hard day because their boss was hard on them, so they decide to control everything else.
I think that's a form of competition. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, competition
they have to one-up everybody.
Yeah, and they've gotten where they are by doing that, and so they need to continue to do that, even if they're Elon Musk, going to Mars. The motherfucker is still acting like. Some people online have seen him as a bully in certain states. He was just in court because he called someone a pedo or something like that. So he still, and I thought about that. I'm like, why, dude? Why are you picking fights with a working class guy?
Even the peons feel, I think even the peons can be sort of that way too, because you get henpecked at work all day. So then you decide to go the other way and control that one thing.
I think bully is a trickle-down kind of thing. That's certain, but that's what we're talking. Like, I think it's learned, but then there's certain animals that are straight-up bullies. Like, they just stick there. They don't ever evolve out of that. Like, I'm going to go to personal experiences now, because like, I've been bullied and I've bullied, and when I was bullied, I was I was the biggest kid in grade school, and the smallest kid in high school. So I remember bullying when I was in grade school. When I was bigger, I played football and I could be pretty aggressive. And then I got bullied. And I remember, here's my worst bullying experience, and I hope you'll share yours.
Okay.
But mine is like, the first place I started drinking was called the Hill House. And, I'm 16 and they drink over there, and the mom would buy booze, and she was divorced, and all the kids would come over there and drink. And then everyone would do these things called hinddy bindies, where they would pull your underwear up from behind until it hurt. But you'd see underwear come out of your pants. So that was one thing they would do. And then the other thing they would do is it was like almost a frat thing. Like, frat parties are bullies. It almost there's a concept of bullies right there as a frat. But they would grab like me and Matt Dwyer and some other people and they would grab the smaller people, and I remember like pile on us and then pick us up and put our heads in a toilet and flush the toilet, and they call that swirlies. It was not, I don't like admitting that. It's a hard thing to admit, but it's the way it is. I started hanging out with bikers after that, because then we'd go, oh, I remember this. So we start going across the street, and there's these outlaw bikers, not the actual gang outlaws. I'm just talking about 1%ers. Mm-hmm. And I don't say the gang names. I wouldn't say that. But I started hanging out over there because I went over. They used to sell weed. And we went over to get weed, and we're smoking weed in the garage. And these bullies, the people I hung out with at the time, kept trying to force weed on me. They're like, come on, smoke. And I'm like, I don't want to smoke, because I wasn't smoking weed at the time. And they kept doing it. And this biker comes on and goes, leave that fucking kid alone. He'll smoke when he wants to. Quit fucking pushing it. And they all looked, and they left me alone after that. And I'm like, my hero, I'm going to hang out here where things seem just. And then I was able to put wet t-shirt contests, like throw water on girl. It was a real fun time, and it was just. I didn't get bullied. It was just a fun. We drank beer, and I eventually started smoking pot. And I really liked the bikers, and those people that I hung out with at the Hills house was jocks. They were jocks. They were the football team. They were all that. So anyway, those are my worst bullying experience, was having my head stuck in a toilet. It's not fun. Not fun at all. But anyway.
I had some weird ones I'm going to say them in 3 phases. In elementary school, I didn't feel like I experienced bullying until maybe 3rd through 5th grade. It was also a time that I think I realized that I did not have the same powers that white girls had. I saw that I could be told anything by other girls that was very cruel sometimes, or sometimes I was oversensitive, I'll admit that. But if I got upset over it, the teacher would say, get over it. If I snapped back something back at the kid, they would, and then cry about it, and then, oh, poor princess, and I was a bully. Even if I told them just like, well, you're stupid too, or something like that, because they started it. I think that I kind of learned in elementary school, based on how kids treated me, that I was less precious than them. So right away, I felt like I needed to just avoid being bullied, because I will never win. In fact, the only time that I was targeted that I ever won was because a kid flicked hot wax in my eyes. We were doing some sort of science thing with wax, and I think that's kind of stupid that we were using candles in 4th grade. But one kid was trying to be funny and flick his pencil in and out of the flame, and it splashed and got into my eyes, and I hit the kid. Because that was my reaction, was hit the kid, because I just got fucking wax in my eyes. And the teacher came over and told me, we do not hit in this class. And I'm like pointing at my eyes, and she's like, what are you talking about? And then she took a look again, and then she thumped the other kid. So on one hand, we do not hit. Big people don't hit little people. And so there was a hypocrisy, but there were other feuds I had with this kid where I had contempt because the kid was just so squirrely, and I would have enough of it because he was in my space. But his feelings were more important than mine, according to the teacher's reactions to them.
Interesting.
The other side of that one was that there was another kid who relentlessly actually picked on me. Wasn't annoying, but rather anywhere I went, anytime I was enjoying something, he would just shame me for smiling, shame me for how I looked, and just, oh, you're so disgusting. You're so ugly. Oh, God. And just being such a jerk about this. And it gave me a complex that, okay, this is why I never got treated right by the teachers. I'm ugly. And so I started into middle school feeling disgusting. Middle school, I got bullied because I just gave up. I gave up on social life because I was already sheltered by my parents, but also the other kids who were on their way to be social and popular, became very popular in middle school, and I had less and less friends, so I just took whatever I could get. I ended up friends with all the Hesher kids, who were all, they didn't judge me. They let me be as weird as I wanted, and they seemed okay with me, and most of them are still my friends.
Yeah, right.
And
a form of bikers. Yeah.
Yes, but all the popular kids continued to target me. One kid actually punched me in the face in a science class. It was a boy punched me, and the teacher, who was a woman, did not care. Because the kid was already a screwball, and so she was just kind of like, oh, well, he's going to bug people anyway. I had bullies in other classes because they were kids who were also overachievers, but I wasn't the teacher or their parents or their image of what an overachiever should be, even though I was their adversary. And some of them were musicians as well. We took the same piano lessons, stuff like that, and those kids tried to contribute to getting me expelled when Columbine happened. In fact, they told the school lies about me in an attempt to try to get rid of me. The craziest thing about this, sweet justice, is the end of that time. At the end of middle school, I actually got a lot of awards for like attendance and all these things like that. So it's kind of funny. High school, I only had one set of bullies. One was sports. I had a tennis bully, and her mother was also a bully of my mother. And it was a very strange thing that was kind of boiled into her daughter's life. And it was kind of racially driven also, that form of bullying. They were also Asian, but they were an Asian who do not like the kind of Asian I am. And then the other was a set of twins who were on a flag team with me, and they both hated me, and one of them threatened to beat the shit out of me right there in front of the coach, right there in front of the other girls, and they eventually scared me out of that team and gave me a strange prejudice about twins until I became college roommates with twins and very close friends with several sets of twins, which got me over my slight fear of twins I had for a while.
Two things I got there.
Oh.
Were you done?
Yes.
Okay, two things. There's one. One was the idea that like in my generation, a lot of times, what boys were, boys will be boys. You'd hear these excuses, and I get where we're at presently in society, but this is my day. And so it was always equated that a boy bully liked you. It was a boy flirting with you.
I remember that.
That's one thing. And the other thing I think of is, like you mentioned, Columbine, which is interesting. I did an interview with the friend, Matt Dwyer. He's a comedian, and he's online. You can search him. He's an old friend. And on his radio show, on his podcast, and we spoke about being bullied when we were younger in this group. And he spoke about, like, he was handcuffed to the outside in his underwear on the railing in the winter while all the popular girls came to the party. He was handcuffed there in his underwear. So yeah, we got severe bullying, and he was on stage even once. And I saw him live, and he spoke about this. He said, anyway, on his radio show, to compare with Columbine, we spoke about, like, we were the original school shooters. Like, we sat there and got together and spoke about wanting to kill these bullies. We never obviously did that. It just wasn't a thing then. It was a different thing then. But we spoke about that, and it's boy, you think about online bullying now and how many instances there have been of people killing themselves because they've been bullied. And it's really it's really a weird thing that I feel like is being, like you said, the younger kids aren't into that.
I remember feeling suicidal in high school, and I didn't realize I felt suicidal until I was an adult. And then I thought back on how that felt. I forgot another one. Just real quick. I was in school not only during Columbine, but also 9/11 happened the same week we were talking about Pearl Harbor. And my teacher, who was a total Peggy Hill, made me apologize for Pearl Harbor one day when she got sick of me trying to correct her over the pronunciation of Japanese words.
Oof.
And
you are part Japanese.
Yes.
Just to tell the audience
and
there.
someone wrote terrorist in ketchup on my locker and threw glass at me. And no one remembers that from high school. Everyone erased it, and I was made go to class. And at that point, again, I had given up on telling my parents about bad things that happened to me. And I know it made me very sensitive about being outed as Japanese American. And it made me have this sort of bullish sense of pride about it. So I think myself as a bully, it did sort of shape my reactions when people seem to catch attention that I'm Japanese American and they don't know me. If they are not Japanese American, I tend to have the gut reaction that they're going to either have a problem or say something that I'm going to have to defend.
That's interesting. That's really, it's uncomfortable to hear those stories. But the thing I'm thinking about now, my thoughts are all over the place now. But I have to think about my whole career, how I've been I was bullied out of Ely, Minnesota when I was run out. I've been bullied, and I remember I lived in Astoria, Oregon for a good amount of time, probably the longest I've ever lived in one spot. And I remember being invited to a Christmas party. And there was a gentleman there, and he was talking about me before I got there. So I walked in, and we were at the door, and he's in another room, and I can hear him talking about my story. And then he goes, but there's been tribes throughout history that have shunned people and they just don't even know why. It's the look, it's the smell, it's this, but they shun them and stuff like that. And I walk in, and I go, "Are you talking about me?" And he's like, "No." And I go, I sort of laugh. Because I heard him bring up my name and then bring this up, and these young ladies, the artists were sticking up for me, like, there's no reason that he's there's no good reason to treat him that way. There's no good reason. He's just an artist. He's just this. Everyone's making a bigger deal out of it than they should. He's no different than this. So I hear it, and he goes, "Well, sometimes that just happens, and when it happens over and over again, maybe it's just natural."
Might I ask, what kind of people were these?
What do you mean by what?
What were their lines of work?
This person was a computer engineer, scientist person. He ran security for the internet. I was
kind of expecting a kind of techish person.
Oh, what? Well, yeah, that was him. And then the other people were artists, mostly artists in the house that did scrub jobs here and there to get by. But they were, what would you call an artist? I don't know, I don't know. They're artists.
Bohemian?
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Bohemians. They were basically bohemians there, except for this gentleman. He was a professional.
It was really to ask. It was really hard. It was really hard for me.
Well, it was really hard for me to hear that because I have been run out of towns. I've been fucking picked on my whole life. My parents picked on me. And I don't want to, I'm not playing the victim. I've always, I am and I'm not, whatever. I survived. I'm a survivor is how I look at it. And so, but I've had this through my whole career, and it really bothers me. Like, why do people do that? Like, I have something to offer. I have so much to offer that it's inspiring them to do they're ripping off my fucking ideas. Why wouldn't they want to work with me? Like, I just don't understand this. It's still, anyway, I'm conflicted. What were you going to say? I'm sorry. This is an emotional subject, and I'm, getting weird.
I understand, and you can be weird. I'm weird too. I was going to ask you if those other artists were a little bit more conventional or a kind of artist that he was comfortable with. It sort of reminds me of your version of when I've had many times that people were less comfortable with me because I present myself as a more threatening minority than my peers. And I'm everything that they didn't expect. So they're a little caught off guard or weird about me. And it makes me wonder if he felt that way about you.
Well, that's almost a trick question because the nuances of this, I could answer it in two ways.
Okay.
The nuances of it, of being me walking into the room that has a big history versus these other artists, there's that comes into play. And then you're like, are they conventional? Every motherfucker's conventional next to me except for like Gigi Allen or some shit because I'm an extreme artist that has done extreme things. So when you work within like I was a friend of Anton LaVey, as anyone who's listened for a couple episodes know, I brag about it every other show. But
I brag to my friends that my friend knew Anton LaVey.
It's pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I got a note last night from Stanton LaVey, but we'll talk. I digress. The idea is that you use the S word, you're already like the most extreme person in the world.
Oh.
A Satanist walking into a room is already like an extremist. And then there's me, a person that is publicly known for it, has done pornography, has done fucking heavy stuff that I put out obscene books. So as far as conventional goes, not you, but y'all are conventional compared to me and a couple, and like 18 of my friends that are in art that kills. You're all conventional. But in the general term, I would say it was a mixed bag. There was a couple people that the guy that invited me, he was like, he's like, you do great in Berlin. And I go, you don't think I fit in America?
Man, I was told that a lot in LA.
Yeah, he goes, in America, it just doesn't work for you. But in Berlin, they take you as a prince, man, a king. And I'm like, Berlin, huh? So he was a cool guy, but still the same, his artwork didn't turn me on. And I like experimental, abstract, modern art. And he was doing some of that. And, whatever. It was great for Astoria, Oregon, a tourist town.
I was going to ask if they were very Oregonian artists.
Yeah. And I got to, again, the nuance is I'm from Chicago. So we have a fucking huge culture here. And it's very diverse. You don't get it's land of Lincoln. You cannot be a racialist here. We're jowl to jowl, eye to eye. You can't fuck around here. And the culture, people push their culture on you. This is Puerto Rican art. This is Hispanic art. This is Polish art. They're pushing it, and it's a different. So it's not. I'm not in Astoria, Oregon, where it's all white people that are fishing, Swedish people, which was really boring for me, a guy from Chicago. So there's, the nuances.
I understand that. I'm laughing because this is so relatable to me. This is a very similar thing to the local yokels of the Bay Area who are musicians. I had very similar conversations here as well. Or I was told go back to LA. I was told go back to China. I was ching-chonged in this area. LA, I was told many times by classical musicians, oh, you do great in Berlin. And it was oftentimes something that you just have to take it as a compliment. But in your head, you're like, why am I not good enough for here? And it was oftentimes a comment made by someone who later on I think of how underskilled they were. How they didn't do much. And, 5, 6, 10 years along the road, they haven't done much better. And I've kept on trucking. You've kept on trucking. Boy,
that mediocrity that we spoke about in a different context that's not applicable here. Mm-hmm. But boy, does that mediocrity come out in fake predators, or I don't want to say fake, but trickle-down predators, trickle-down bullies, people that are mediocre. That's how I feel about it. Because when I get with people of my own ilk, and I don't like to say this stuff because I like to think that we can all stratification. I believe in that. And I think there's peace in true stratification, like a peaceful existence between all of us. So I don't like, but this is the way it is. When I get along with, when I hang out with artists, they're usually high end, top tier. The friends I've had have gone on to do really amazing stuff, historic stuff. So I've been lucky. Like Dave Archer did artwork for the USS Enterprise. He's one of the only artists that's in a movie on the fucking Star Trek ship. Like my friends are high-end artists usually, and they're my friends because they don't act like mediocre assholes.
Yes, they're too busy using that energy toward their life, toward their art. They're living for themselves, not to henpeck other people.
Yeah, and the reason we find each other so that we're friends is because we find each other interesting. It's not because
Yes.
we're the same ilk, let's say. I don't know what ilk means.
Mm.
I do know what it means, but it's like I don't want to use that word. I, we find each other interesting, but we don't always have the same politics. We don't always have the
Right.
same philosophical beliefs. Seldom do we in an artist circle. Becomes very individual, and we trip out on what each other thinks, but we find each other interesting. So that's where the spark is. And I think that's the top tier. Like they find things interesting where the mediocre dismiss the interesting because they're not interesting.
Absolutely. It's clipping other people's wings so you can stand taller is what those people do. And it's, unfortunately, it's the same people who say things like, oh, we got to build each other up. It's that same person saying, we got to build each other up, who's the one knocking everyone down.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a weird.
So I got to build each other up story for you. So I DJ'd an event, and this girl who was a friend of another DJ there walked straight up to me after my set and complimented me on my set and said she liked certain songs that I played and stuff. And I was like, oh, thanks so much. I'm glad you liked it. Thanks for coming out. And then I started to walk away because I was going to pack up my gear and get ready to go home. And she corners me onto the wall and goes, hey, I just built you up, and we as women need to build each other up and everything, and you're just going to walk away? How about you buy me a drink?
What in the fuck?
Yeah. And what's crazy is it's not the first time that someone in San Jose who was taller than me and paler than me and maybe 5 years older than me has pushed me around like this. And it made me feel very strange because it almost made me feel like this person was threatened by me somehow or just had some sort of territorial issues. It kind of went into the same category as women who scrape their food into my plate and tell me that I need to eat more. And women like this or like women who made me stand in the sun when I had already told them I have a medical issue with sunlight. And it was very strange, and I didn't know what to do. I was really scared, actually, because she had also been drinking, and I was sober. But I had drink tickets, so I actually got her a couple drinks with my drink tickets and then fucked off from there because I didn't want to have anything to do with that girl anymore. But
see, and that's where I see the alpha, the one who's able to navigate that situation and get away.
Right. Why would I fight this?
There's a good book, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, that talks a lot about this. And in there, and in a later episode that we're going to do this year, this season, I'm going to tell the story behind this phrase, and it's really heartbreaking for me. But it's tall men make more money. And I heard this in the Malcolm Gladwell book, and he says it's true. Tall men make more money in our society, even though they don't perform better. It's purely the height, just like white men make more money. Tall white men make more money. And so they make the most money. They're the CEOs. So I would suggest The Tipping Point from Malcolm Gladwell, first of all. And again, I've already said what I have to say. It's this concept of bullies is upsetting to me. And I don't, I wonder where I fit into the bully scheme of things, or was I just taught how to deal with, like as an early age, was I taught to deal with things in violence, like fight? And from a bully. My father was, bullied me, so I tried to imitate that. Mm-hmm. But I don't have that. I've never found pleasure in competing. I just don't find pleasure in that kind of stuff. So I wonder,
Do you know what? I personally do not like competitive environments either. I've spent most of my time as a musician in competitive environments, and one of the reasons I don't play in symphonies anymore is because of the amount of bullying, the amount of over aggressive, unnecessary mannerisms, and these rules that are put into play most of the time. You know what? Most of the time, it's these contractors who hire their friends, and most of the time, it's these subpar musicians who are basically kind of like president of the yearbook. They have the camera in their hand, so they get to take the pictures of the kids for the yearbook. And they work at the bank during the day. but they had musical parents. And this is how they're able to keep their foot in the door. And so, again, it's this mediocrity behaving like a bully many times.
And it just brings me back to the beginning of the show when you spoke about the sled dogs and the ones at the front jumping up, making a ruckus while the ones in the back are not. You know, like, and the ones in the back are the ones that give those people drink tickets and navigate themselves the fuck out to get get around the fire first. Like they're around the fire, you know.
I've got a story for you about sitting in the back. So there were some orchestras that sat in the back intentionally, people of demographics they didn't care for. For example, I was hired many times by a Korean orchestra that realized who was Japanese in the orchestra, and they threw all of them in the back. And same with the black people in the orchestras. And for some instruments, you can't do that because there's only 2 flutes, so you have to sit them by each other. But with the string players, I got used to sitting in the back. And at first, of course, it was punch to the gut. You're told your whole life, sit in the front, you have to be the best. But then I learned how to make friends with other musicians by sitting in the back. I learned how to laugh at my mistakes because the attention wasn't completely on me. And I made it cool to sit in the back because I would take my colleagues who sat in the back with me out for drinks, even though I didn't drink. I would treat them to drinks or take them to parties that I was invited to outside of orchestras and just take them out for a good time. And then other people heard about it and would ask, hey, can we come too? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And eventually the people in the front also came out with us. And I felt like it was my way of making lemonade and feeling okay about it because I used control for good.
Yeah, again, that fine line between control and guidance. So I feel like maybe you did more guidance than control.
Do you know what? I became friends with bikers after high school too. Actually, post-college, when I worked in bars, I worked at a place that was a hangout for a lot of outlaw people. And a lot of people who worked there also were amongst the 1%. And I think through those environments, I learned how to face situations instead of run away from them. Because for most of my life, I just run away from conflicts. I still have a tendency of hanging up on people when I'm upset because my defense is run away. And I think working amongst very tough people and people who had it harder than me and just tough lives, people who live tough lives, they taught me either just watching them or just I had times too where people were like, hey, don't talk to her like that. But then they told me everyone gets one. Next time you're on your own. Now you know how to do it. And I can't help but feel like that environment made me more sensitive toward bullies and things like that, but also teach people how to deal with bullies when I see it happen. I think yourself, if you, how do you feel when you see other people being bullied?
Well, present day, I stand up immediately and say that will not stand. Like especially since 2016, I've been in grocery stores in like Astoria, Oregon, where it's all white Scandinavians. And it's a tourist town, so people of color will come into town as tourists. And I started seeing people stand off, like stare down people of color.
No.
And I'm like, hey, dude, are you looking at me? And he's like, no, you. And I go, no, look at me. You know, I get right in their face now because I just can't tolerate it. You know, I'm upset about that stuff and I'm not going to have it. But again, I go back to control versus guidance. And I have to think about, is the parent being a bully or are they trying to guide the child? Like the deer, I remember, like I watched the deer and I remember throwing apple pieces over a fence to these deers that would come to my house every morning. And I'm throwing the apple pieces over and the young deer was going to go eat it. And the mother went over and whacked it. Like, you know, don't eat that apple, you know, and didn't eat the apple either, but it went over and pulled. And I was like, that's guidance. That's not bully. That's guidance.
Yes.
Because she's not bothered by, she's like, don't trust this guy. It's a cut apple. Like maybe something I cut the apple with, it had a scent, who knows? But when I fed them full apples, they ate them. When I cut them, they didn't. So whatever that mother saw, it was guidance, but it was firm. And so there's that fine line between the abuse, like, do you consider bullying abusive?
Yes.
Right. And so there's guidance where a parent might smack your hand before you touch fire and say no. And then there's bullying. And so, yeah. That's all I think. I don't know.
Do you think your experience being bullied makes you more sensitive to see these things because you've experienced them?
Well, it's made me a lot of things. Present day, I'm an older, wiser person. But when I was younger, I definitely reflected a lot of what my father gave me. I was born of violence. So I would be threatening to people. I would scare people unintentionally. But when I saw that, I was scaring people and it was getting me somewhere, I continued to do it. And so that felt a little like I was being a bully, but I didn't feel good about it. It was just, I have to get to this location. And so it got me somewhere. And those were the coping mechanisms I was taught as a child. So as I've grown up and been able to hang out with cool artists and have a whole different life than my parents, I've learned from that guidance I learned from the bullying of my father and mother, and I've learned from the guidance of my, what you call peers, like Dave Archer. I remember one time he's talking to me when he first met me, and he goes, "Shane, you are a beautiful human being, but you have to work on your tone. It's all in the tone." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you like, ah!" And Dave's
I
like,
was told that a lot too.
your tone, Shane, your tone. So that guidance from my mentors has brought me along where I try to work on my tone. But I think also, like, my natural character, it's not like I changed. Like, I don't like to hear that. It's not like I never felt good about it. And I know people that feel good about fighting, about hurting people. I know sadists. I know really damaged people who like to damage people. And I think that became something that I was taught. Damaged people damage people. And so when the guidance helped me a lot more than being bullied. Bullying didn't help me anything but act like the lowest form of our species. And I think, like, basically my father raised me like some people raise dogs. That was how he raised me. So I acted accordingly. I am not proud of that stuff, but I've played both roles. I've never felt good. I've said many times today, probably, I've never felt good about it. And I'm not into competition. I'm into collaborations and evolution and trying to come up with new ideas out of old ideas, or making old new, stuff like that. So
do you think for a better conversation with others, better community, we should just make like Vanilla Ice and stop, collaborate, and listen?
I didn't know that Vanilla Ice said that, but it's
from Ice Ice Baby. It's the first lines. He goes, "All right, stop, collaborate, and listen."
My goodness. Well, my little brother was into Vanilla Ice, and I got to take him to a Vanilla Ice concert, and I saw Vanilla Ice live, and it was funny because he got the most cheers. Like, I saw guitar solos get cheers. Vanilla Ice would just stop, drop, and look at strike a pose, like the people are going to take a photo.
He is a beautiful man.
He would stop like he's posing for a photo, and that's where he got all the cheers. The audience went wild, and I was just like, he didn't do anything. He just posed. But fine, have a good time, But no, I didn't know that was in the song, but what an artist of prophecy. But yes, I think we need to stop, collaborate, and listen.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune into our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit shanebugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh. and shaneisthedevil.com.